This story happened exactly 10 years ago. Right after graduating from university and before starting my job, I wanted to take a break and unwind. So I decided to visit my grandmother, who lived in a remote village. I apologize, but I can't reveal the specific name of the village where she lived. I planned to stay for a week, so I packed my bags and called my grandmother to let her know I was coming. Then I took an express bus to the Chungcheong region. My grandmother greeted me with a beaming smile, and since I was her only granddaughter, whom she had doted on since I was little, she took care of me with great affection. She raised chickens, and when she heard her granddaughter was visiting, she personally caught one, cooked a hearty ginseng chicken soup, and prepared all sorts of delicious dishes for me to enjoy. Oh, and I should mention the place where my grandmother lived was a true countryside village, surrounded by rice paddies and terraced fields. It was such a small community that everyone knew everything about their neighbors, what was happening in whose house, who lived where, even how many spoons were in each household. I had been staying at my grandmother's house for 2 days. Since it was a rural area, the bathroom was outside, a traditional squat toilet. That night, while sleeping, I suddenly woke up with an urgent need to use the bathroom. My grandmother was fast asleep beside me, and I was too scared to go out alone. So I played some music on my phone, relying on the faint glow of the screen to guide me as I made my way to the outhouse to take care of business. When I stepped out of the bathroom, I saw a strange little girl standing by the back gate of my grandmother's house. It was around 2 in the morning. I softly asked, "Whose kid are you?" But the girl didn't answer. She looked pitiful. Her hair was messy, her face covered in scratches, and her clothes were tattered and torn. I asked again, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" The girl just stood there, staring at me. The first thought that popped into my head was something my grandmother had told me the moment I arrived in the village. She had warned me that sometimes wandering beggars would show up in the village. So I assumed this girl was one of those beggars. It was late and I was exhausted, so I thought, whatever, she'll just stand there and leave on her own, and went back to the room to sleep. The next morning, over breakfast, I told my grandmother about the encounter. Her reaction was a bit strange. She said, "A child? There aren't any kids among the beggars around here. Maybe you saw it wrong." But I was certain it was a child. When I insisted it was definitely a kid, she said, "Are you sure you didn't mistake something? Maybe you were half asleep and imagined it because you were scared. At first, I wondered if I had indeed seen something in my sleepy haze." A day passed, and the next morning, my grandmother said she was going to the market, so I tagged along. After shopping for various things, we were on our way back home. That's when I noticed the house next to my grandmother's. It looked like it had been abandoned for a long time. I asked, "Grandma, what's up with that house? Does anyone live there?" She replied, "Oh, that house? It's been empty since I moved here. The owners moved to the city, so it's been left vacant. My grandmother had moved to Chungcheong after my grandfather passed away, and she had only been in this village for 2 years. I didn't think much of it, assuming that's just how it was, but something about the house felt eerie. I chalked it up to it being an abandoned house, lacking the warmth of a lived-in home. Time passed, and it was my 6th day at my grandmother's. I was packing up the things I'd brought, preparing to return to Seoul the next morning. It was around 11 at night. My grandmother had gone to bed early because she was tired, and I was alone, listening to music through my earphones while organizing my belongings. I didn't have the music too loud, but with earphones on, it's harder to hear sounds from outside. Suddenly, I felt like someone touched my shoulder. I thought maybe my grandmother was calling me, and I hadn't heard, so she tapped me. I turned around, but my grandmother was still fast asleep. I thought, "What's going on?" and turned back, taking off my earphones to get ready for bed. That's when I heard footsteps in the yard outside my grandmother's house. My immediate thought was that it might be a thief. I quietly cracked the door open to peek outside. It was the same girl I'd seen a few nights ago when I went to the bathroom at dawn, standing in the yard, staring at my grandmother's room. I felt both puzzled and creeped out. I woke my grandmother up and said, "Grandma, that girl I saw the other night at dawn is standing out in the yard all alone." She replied, "What are you talking about?" and opened the door. But the girl was gone, vanished without a trace. I had just seen her and woken my grandmother immediately, so there's no way she could have disappeared that quickly in the split second before we opened the door. Besides, I had only whispered to my grandmother, so the girl couldn't have heard me. When my grandmother confirmed there was no one there, she scolded me. "Oh, come on, why are you waking me up in the middle of my sleep? Go to bed already." I said, "Okay," and closed the door, but before shutting it completely, I glanced out at the yard again. The girl was there again. She raised her hand, gesturing for me to follow her. It was as if I was under a spell. I slipped on my shoes and instinctively followed her. The closer I got, the more pitiful and filthy she looked, to the point where I wondered if she was even human. She led me to the abandoned house next to my grandmother's. Inside, it was completely devoid of warmth, chillingly eerie. The floor was covered in thick black dust, almost like ashes. But in the brief moment I looked down at the floor and then back up, the girl was gone, nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, it was like I snapped out of a trance, and fear started to creep in. At that moment, the cold air around me felt suffocating, and I heard my grandmother calling from outside the house. I ran to her in a panic. She immediately started hitting me, saying, "What are you doing here? Why did you come here? Are you out of your mind?" She scolded me relentlessly. I asked, "Grandma, why are you here?" She explained that after I woke her up and she tried to go back to sleep, she noticed I hadn't closed the door and had gone outside. Thinking I was going to the bathroom, she kept an eye on me. Then she saw me walk out the back gate in a strange manner, so she followed me out of worry. She said she called out to me several times from behind, but I didn't hear her and just kept walking into this house alone. I explained the whole story to her, but my grandmother insisted that, from her perspective, there was no one in front of me. I was walking alone. She said it seemed like I was possessed, but I had clearly seen the girl and followed her. Regardless, we returned to my grandmother's house. It was dark outside, and when I went inside and turned on the light, I noticed my hands and shoes were covered in black dust, like charred ashes. My grandmother saw it and asked, "What's this?" She told me to wash up thoroughly and that we'd talk in the morning. So that night I cleaned myself up and went to bed with her. That night I had a dream. In it, the girl appeared again, angrily asking, "Why did you leave? Why did you leave?" It was a short but vivid dream. When I woke up, I thought, there's some connection between that house and that girl, and immediately told my grandmother about the dream. After hearing my story, she thought for a moment and then made a phone call. The person she called was none other than the village chief. From him, she learned a story. The chief said that until 1997, that house had been the wealthiest in the village. The owners were a couple who ran a small company and made a lot of money. They had an only son, a third grader about 10 years old, who was so spoiled that everyone could tell he was from a rich family. But in 1997, the IMF crisis hit. The couple's company was directly affected, unable to pay employees, and went completely bankrupt. It seems creditors came knocking. Faced with that situation, the husband doused the house with gasoline and set it on fire late at night. What's even more horrifying is that if it had just been him, it might have been less tragic, but his wife and son, who were sleeping in the house, were also burned to death. The villagers who witnessed the fire called the fire department, and the firefighters quickly put out the blaze and cleaned up the scene. They found the bodies of the husband and wife, but they couldn't tell if the boy's body had been completely incinerated or not. They couldn't find it. So the house was left abandoned for over 7 or 8 years. The village chief had instructed everyone to keep the incident a secret. He said that if the story spread, the already remote village would become even more desolate. He gave a small sum of money to each villager to keep them quiet. He even paid off the police and firefighters who responded to the scene, ensuring the information wouldn't leak. That's why the house was only rumored to be abandoned, because the owners moved to the city, and that's all my grandmother knew. Perhaps the girl appeared to me because if she appeared to the villagers, they'd silence her, and she wanted me to know so I could help her find peace. When I heard the story, my heart ached deeply. But the village chief told me, "Act like you never heard this. If you spread this story, you'll be in big trouble," his tone half threatening. I just said, "Yes, sir, I understand." That day, before boarding the bus back to Seoul, I stopped by the house next door. I left some candies that a young girl might like and lit incense to comfort her spirit, then headed to Seoul. After that, I don't know what happened. My grandmother said she couldn't live in a village with that chief anymore, that she couldn't stand it, and she moved to another village. 10 years have passed since that incident, but whenever I think of the countryside or my grandmother, the memory of that day still vividly haunts my mind. Today, I want to share a story from my time in the military. I was assigned to a coastal defense unit on the western coast of South Korea. At that time, efforts to eliminate violence in the military were being widely implemented, but since these were deeply ingrained habits, they weren't easy to eradicate. In the platoon I was newly assigned to, there was a private first class who was notorious. He'd find any excuse, big or small, to berate and curse at the new recruits every single day. When the new recruits gathered among themselves, all they did was complain about this guy. They'd say things like, "That jerk's not even human." If I ran into him outside the military, I'd show him what's what. Many of the new recruits endured daily humiliation and shame just to get through their service. When I arrived, there was another recruit a year older than me assigned to the same platoon. We were the newest soldiers, so we were still pretty clueless about a lot of things. Even though we were in the same enlistment group, when it was just the two of us, I called him Hyung, a Korean term for an older brother often used respectfully, and looked up to him. He became a huge source of encouragement for me throughout my military service. And so our life as privates began, and we were assigned to coastal patrols. The coastal watch involved pairs, one commanding officer and one assistant officer, rotating with other soldiers to patrol checkpoints along the shore from dusk until dawn. After sunrise, we'd return to the barracks to catch up on sleep in the morning, then start our duties again in the afternoon. This routine repeated daily and could either be bearable or absolute hell, depending on who the commanding officer was that day. One day, that infamous private first class and my buddy from the same enlistment group were assigned to the same watch team. When they returned to the barracks after their shift, my buddy said, "That guy's not human." Seriously, I almost punched him. "You be careful, too." I asked, "What happened?" He explained that among the checkpoints we guarded, there was a 2-story outpost. It was the farthest one in our platoon, surrounded by nothing. No buildings, no signs of human activity, so it had an eerie, chilling vibe. Plus, since it was the last stop before heading back to the barracks, nobody wanted to be assigned there. It was my buddy's first time at that outpost, and it seemed the private first class had played a cruel prank on him. My buddy recounted the story. The first floor of that outpost, even in broad daylight, was almost completely dark because all the walls were boarded up with rotting wooden planks. So we only used the second floor for patrols, but there was a staircase leading from the second floor to the first. The staircase was also wooden and nearly rotted through. The platoon had deemed it dangerous, so they'd sealed off the entrance to the first floor with plywood. But during their shift, the private first class started telling a story. You know why the first floor is boarded up, right? Bet you haven't heard this one. This place used to be a small inn. One day, a girl waiting for her boyfriend to finish his military service was assaulted by some soldiers and ended up hanging herself in the bathroom. After that, her ghost started appearing in the bathroom. You'd hear water running in there even when no one was around, and sometimes the shower would turn on by itself, even with people present. The inn went bankrupt, and the military took over the area to use as an outpost. But you know the best part? Every new recruit has to perform a rookie ritual. You go down the stairs to the first floor, turn left, and find the bathroom next to the toilet. There's a roll of toilet paper on the toilet tank. You have to grab it, bring it up, and put it back to complete the ritual. Oh, and no flashlights allowed, just your night vision goggles. I did it when I was a private, too. My buddy, trembling with fear, stepped onto the creaky, rotting staircase. It was summer, so the air was thick with humidity, and he couldn't tell if the dampness was sweat or something else. He said just going down was terrifying enough, but hearing that story made the fear unbearable, his mind spinning. He finally found the toilet paper roll, but in his panic, he dropped it, and it got soaked by water on the floor. When he brought it up, the private first class hit him for it. Hearing this story from my buddy made me hate that private first class so much I wanted to punch him myself. About 2 weeks later, I was assigned to guard that same outpost with a private first class during a heavy rain. The watch was supposed to last 2 hours, But as soon as we got there, he started tormenting me, saying, "Hey, sing something. Make me laugh. Tell me about girls." Then he told me I had to do the rookie ritual, just like he'd made my buddy do. He even said, "If a ghost shows up, you've never seen a girl before, so go ahead and touch it. See if it's pretty, get a good look at its face." He kept cursing and laughing to himself. I thought, well, it's finally my turn. The entrance to the staircase leading to the first floor was blocked by an old plywood board. I moved it aside and saw a dark, cave-like opening. It was so gloomy, it felt like a black hole pulling me in. The first floor was pitch black, silent except for the sound of insects and rain. I carefully stepped onto the creaking wooden stairs and descended to the first floor. Just then, the private first class slammed the plywood back over the entrance from above. I flinched but remembered my buddy's story, so I took a deep breath and started looking for the toilet paper roll. The first floor was much larger than it seemed from the outside, and the staircase went deeper than expected. From the outside, it looked like a regular first floor, but going down felt like descending into a basement. The smell of rotting wood and mold filled the air, giving me a headache. Looking around through my night vision goggles was like a scene from a horror movie. I'm human too, and the fear that something might jump out at any moment made my head spin. Still, I searched around the bathroom with my night vision goggles, but I couldn't find the toilet paper roll anywhere. No matter how carefully I looked, it just wasn't there. So I stood at the base of the stairs and shouted up to the private first class that there was no toilet paper. After a moment, he lifted the plywood and said, "What the hell are you talking about? There's never been a time when the toilet paper wasn't there. Don't give me that nonsense." I insisted, "I'm telling you, it's not there." He said, "You're just scared to go near the bathroom, aren't you? Some private you are, acting all pathetic." He didn't believe me. I looked up at him and repeated, "I'm telling you, it's not there." He said, "Fine, get up here." I climbed back up, and he suddenly slammed his fist into my helmet. "If I go down there and find that toilet paper, you're done for." Then he turned on his flashlight. At that moment, I was so angry I wanted to fight him, military or not. But I gritted my teeth and held back. In that moment of rage, I blurted out, "Can you handle it?" The private first class looked at me, confused. "What kind of crazy talk is that? You losing it or what?" Then he turned on his flashlight and slowly descended the stairs. About 2 minutes later, I heard a loud crash. Crash from the first floor, like wood breaking and someone falling uncontrollably. I shouted, "Hey, don't go down there. You jerk." But I didn't move. Because, well, what was bound to happen had happened. I quickly put the plywood back over the entrance, trapping him down there. From below, I heard screams and groans. But it only lasted about a minute, very brief. I lifted the plywood, and the private first class, drenched in sweat, shoved me aside. "You bastard. You did that to mess with me, didn't you?" he raged. I stumbled back a bit, but stepped closer to him. "I told you, can you handle it? If you don't want to lose your mind and get discharged, don't mess with me again. I'll pretend I didn't see anything today, but you better keep quiet and live peacefully until you're discharged." I said this, looking him up and down. His pants were soaked up to his knees. After we finished our shift and returned to the barracks, Private first class, who was usually loud and joking, was grim-faced, chain-smoking. When the other recruits and soldiers asked what was wrong, a few days later, he admitted he'd seen a ghost. He completely left out any mention of me. He said he'd gone down to the bathroom because of a stomachache, but his flashlight suddenly went out and water started flowing from the shower. Panicking, he rushed toward the stairs and saw a pale white hand reaching out from the shower. Even though the flashlight was off and it was pitch black, the hand stood out clearly, almost glowing. Naturally, if this story reached the higher-ups, it'd mean disciplinary action, so it only spread within the platoon. But since it didn't sound like a lie, everyone started dreading shifts at that outpost. Among them was a corporal who cared a lot about the soldiers in our platoon. Some of the senior soldiers told him, "That outpost seems too dangerous. Should we get it fixed?" After reporting to the platoon leader, and with heavy rain at the time, that outpost was taken off the night patrol roster. When I became a private first class and went on leave, my mom and sister came to visit. I asked them to buy me a pack of soju, popular Korean liquor. My mom asked why I, someone who doesn't drink, needed soju, and I just said it was for my comrades. After the visit, a few days later, I secretly brought the soju to the outpost during a shift and poured it out on the first floor, telling the girl's spirit to go to a better place. In that private first class, he stopped tormenting the new recruits so harshly until his discharge. On his discharge day, he apologized to me. I was taught from a young age to be careful with my words. Because of a special fate in my family's horoscope, my words could bring either fortune or harm to others, so I was always told to speak sparingly and never curse anyone. Maybe what happened at that outpost was because my negative energy had an effect. In the end, there's a saying about ghosts born from words. They say that stories passed around, even if they're not true, can create spirits in a place. Perhaps that girl's restless, unhappy spirit lingers at that outpost because her story keeps being told? I wonder. A few years ago, at the request of an acquaintance, I was tasked with finding a suitable plot of land to build a countryside retreat for elderly people. The requirements were clear. The place needed clean air, a quiet environment, but also proximity to a major general hospital. With those criteria in mind, there weren't many options in the area. However, a few locations immediately came to mind. So I spent about a week scouring the outskirts of Pochin, a rural region in South Korea known for its scenic landscapes and peaceful setting, ideal for a retreat. I borrowed my friend's four-wheel drive SUV, a galloper, and drove through narrow mountain paths and rugged trails. While navigating a steep mountain road, I noticed a small side path branching off, and right beside it, I spotted an abandoned house. It was a striking two-story Western-style house painted red, beautifully constructed. Though all the windows were shattered, the garden, spanning about 100 pyeong, roughly 330 square meters, a traditional Korean unit of area, was meticulously maintained, with neatly trimmed grass. There were benches, decorative statues, and even a small stream flowing in front of the garden, creating a picturesque scene that caught plenty of sunlight. It was clear someone was regularly tending to the property, so to avoid trespassing, I stayed outside the fence, took a few photos, and sent them to the client. They loved it. However, things took a turn when I inquired with local real estate agencies about whether the house was for sale. Every agent I spoke to reacted coldly and refused to discuss it. They told me it wasn't on the market and advised against buying it. Right then, I knew this was a haunted house. One agent even asked if I'd gone inside. At the time, I had a younger cousin living nearby, so I asked him to check it out for me. I told the real estate agent I hadn't entered the property. Then the agent, a woman, warned me sternly, "Don't go in there, no matter what. The real estate companies have made that clear. You absolutely shouldn't go inside, and they won't tell you why." I stepped out of the agency and lit a cigarette. Just then my cousin called me, and what he said shocked me. He said, "Bro, that house is a no-go." I went inside, and it seems like a shaman used to live there. In Korea, shamans are spiritual practitioners who perform rituals to communicate with spirits, often for blessings or to ward off bad energy. I replied, "What's the big deal if a shaman lived there? You believe in that superstitious stuff?" He said, "No, it's not that. I think even the shaman saw something so terrifying she fled." Inside, there are ritual paintings, Buddhist statues, and all her shaman tools still there untouched. But the scariest part is when I peeked into the front room. The walls are covered with talismans, those paper charms with red and black writing, plastered all over like wallpaper. What the hell was in there? Hearing that, I thought, yup, this is definitely a haunted house. Gotta steer clear. Later, I heard from another local real estate agent that, after word got out that someone was poking around the house, an elderly couple had been stationed there to keep watch. In Busan, there's a large mountain called Jumjong. It's not toweringly high, but it's vast, sprawling across a wide area. The slopes aren't too steep, and there aren't many rocky patches, so the flatter trails are easy to hike. With natural springs scattered throughout, it's a popular spot for locals to visit regularly. I was wearing summer clothes, so this must have been during the summer. One day, A woman from the nearby village was hiking on the mountain behind her home when she stumbled across a pile of black plastic bags discarded on the trail. She thought to herself, what kind of jerk would litter like this on a mountain that belongs to everyone? Determined to clean up, she decided to carry the bags down. But each bag was tightly packed and double-knotted, making them surprisingly heavy. Unable to carry them all at once, she managed to haul just one bag in each hand down the mountain and toss them into the trash bin at the trailhead. The incident unfolded the next day. When sanitation workers from the city hall came to empty the bins and open the black bags, they were met with a horrifying discovery. They had assumed the bags contained household waste, but inside were what appeared to be parts of a dismembered human body. Not every bag on the mountain contained body parts, but across the vast expanse of Jumjong Mountain, these bags were found scattered randomly, truly randomly, in various locations. The police issued an official notice to the public, instructing people not to touch any full black plastic bags found on the trails or mountain, but to note their location and report them to the authorities immediately. Although they collected quite a few bags, the remains were so fragmented that identifying the victim was impossible. They couldn't even determine if the body belonged to a man or a woman. With little progress in the investigation, no further news came to light, and the case gradually faded into obscurity. Then, in the fall, I don't recall the exact day, another body part was found, relatively small and less decomposed. At the time, Busan's subway line 2 had just opened, so it wasn't heavily used yet. The northern part of the line, in particular, passed through a newly developed area with even fewer people. On Line 2, there's a station called Sujong. The women's restroom at this station is tucked away in a dimly lit, secluded corner, much more so than at other stations. It was in this restroom, specifically in the women's section, that a human leg, believed to belong to a woman, was discovered. This incident made the news, so I remember it clearly. The women's restroom had only 2 stalls, and in one of them was a shopping bag from a high-end brand. A woman who happened to use the restroom found the bag and excitedly told her mother, "Mom, look what I found." But inside that bag was a human leg. After that, I don't know if the investigation made much progress, but rumors spread that the police hadn't caught the culprits since the bags were first found on Jumjong Mountain. Nowadays, many people are unaware of this story, and it's rarely brought up. But every now and then, I wonder, has the perpetrator been caught? Who was the victim? And were all the body parts found on Jumjong Mountain from the same person? I'm 40 years old now, and this story happened about 30 years ago when I was in elementary school. One day, the school was thrown into chaos. In the middle of the day, during class, the police suddenly arrived. The back gate of the school, which had both a main and a side entrance, was completely sealed off, with no one allowed to come or go. The reason? A body had been found in the school's water tank. I don't know if they still exist, but back then, the school's water tank was located behind the building, a large concrete structure. To my child's eyes, it seemed quite tall, though to an adult, it probably wasn't that high. There was also a ladder to make climbing up easier. So, how was the body discovered in the water tank? I don't know now how that tank was connected to the rest of the school's water supply. But what's clear is that one day, hair started coming out of the faucets, and the water flow began to clog, with the pressure getting weaker and weaker. Eventually, the school's maintenance worker, not a security guard, but the person who was always around fixing things and managing the facilities, went to check the tank and open the lid. That's when they found a woman's body inside. Back then, the school didn't have any water purifiers. In our time, there was something called a communal drinking fountain. Some people might know what I'm talking about. It was a tiled basin in the middle of the school hallway with multiple faucets. We'd use aluminum cups to get water from it in the evening, drink from it during lunch, or fill up for gym class. I don't clearly remember if that fountain was connected to the water tank up top. The teachers told us the communal fountain was fed by groundwater, so it was safe to drink. But the fountain was on the first floor, and right behind it was the water tank. So after the woman's body was found, a rumor quickly spread among the kids. The body was in the school's water tank. That's why the police came, and we've been drinking that water. To make matters worse, right next to the communal fountain was a staff-only restroom for the teachers. So when the body was discovered, Some of the female teachers were so shocked that they either left early or didn't teach their classes. After all, the teachers had been using that water for drinking and brushing their teeth too. That day after school, I went home and told my parents about it. But they brushed it off as just kids' rumors, like ghost stories about the school being haunted. I still remember my mom even brought up the story of Wonhyo, a famous Korean monk who unknowingly drank water from a skull and found it refreshing, saying, "Just think of the water with the body is tasty and good for your health." Part of me was worried about whether I'd actually drunk that water, but after my mom said that, I felt a bit relieved and didn't dwell on it too much. But then I saw my school on the TV news. From what I recall, the body belonged to a woman in her 30s who had been missing for a few days, and the body had been in a tank for several days as well. It's likely she was killed shortly after going missing, and her body was dumped in the tank. Though there was suspicion of robbery and murder, among other things, only some of her valuables like metal jewelry were missing while the rest remained, so they couldn't conclude it was a simple robbery. Back then, if an adult went missing, the police often treated it as someone running away and didn't easily accept missing person reports. Anyway, there were only hushed rumors. Among us kids, stories we overheard from adults spread like wildfire. Some said the woman was divorced and living alone, killed while heading to work. Others said she had a boyfriend. Unlike today, back then, when something bad happened to a woman, people often blamed the victim. Regardless, I didn't hear anything about the culprit being caught after the incident. Investigative techniques in the 90s weren't as advanced as they are now, and there weren't security cameras everywhere like today, so the investigation was tough. Plus, the body had been in the water for a while, so it was probably decomposed. Who knows, maybe the culprit is still out there, living a normal life among me or you. About 10 years ago, the memory of this childhood incident suddenly resurfaced, and I got curious about whether my memory was accurate. So I searched online for information about the case. Back then, I found a news article about it, not a modern internet article, but a scanned copy of an old newspaper. Now, though, I can't find it anymore. Oh, and thinking back, the teachers clearly said the communal drinking fountain wasn't connected to the water tank up top. But among the kids, the rumor was that it was. The reason? There were scheduled days when the tank was cleaned, and on those days we were told not to use the fountain. But if the fountain wasn't connected to the tank, why would they tell us not to use it? Because of that, some of my friends cried their eyes out, saying we'd been drinking water with a body in it. My daughter is in elementary school now, and lately she's been really into scary stories and tales about ghosts. She asked me if I've ever experienced anything creepy or seen a ghost. That's when this story came back to me. But I'm still curious. Did I really drink water with a body in it? I'm 27 years old, just an ordinary office worker. My days are filled with work, reports, getting scolded, and redoing tasks. But in this monotonous office life, there was one senior colleague who became a huge source of inspiration for me. He was 29, married young at 23, and now a father to a little girl. As the team leader in our company's central department, you could say he was quite successful. What made him even more likable was his incredible sense of humor. He was truly a ray of positive energy in our lives. Then, one day, he took a leave of absence and returned to the office a week later. But he was a completely different person. Gone was his humor. He barely spoke a word, seemed terrified of the dark, and above all, appeared deeply afraid of being alone in the office. I didn't know what had happened and assumed he might be unwell, which could explain his worn-out appearance. That evening, I invited him to a nearby barbecue restaurant for drinks, hoping to lift his spirits. While we were eating, his face suddenly turned serious, and he asked me, "Kobe, do you believe in ghosts?" "What are you talking about, Hyung?" I replied, using the Korean term for an older brother figure, often used to show respect or closeness. From there, he began to share an unbelievable story about what he'd experienced. At first, when he took his leave, it wasn't because he was sick. Anyone who works knows that taking a Friday off gives you a long weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to relax. That Saturday happened to be his wedding anniversary. So he planned a trip to a nice resort and requested the time off. Since he was a diligent senior, our boss happily approved, and he set off for the resort in high spirits. The resort, a 3-hour drive from Cheonan, a city in South Korea, was everything he'd expected, beautiful and serene. That night, as planned, he set a romantic mood and was about to get intimate with his wife. But just then, there was a knock-knock at the front door. Annoyed, he opened it, but no one was there. Not wanting to ruin the mood, he lied to his wife, saying it was probably the resort staff, and tried to pick up where they left off. But the knock-knock came again. Frustrated, he opened the door again, and once more, no one was there. In the end, the night passed without anything happening. The next day, as planned, they visited a nearby waterfall and explored the resort area, enjoying a pleasant time. Suddenly, he felt a stomachache and went to the men's restroom at the resort, sitting in a stall. Then, someone knocked on the stall door. Knock, knock. Thinking someone was waiting, he quickly finished and stepped out, but no one was there. After the previous night's incident, he felt a bit uneasy but brushed it off, completed their itinerary with his wife, and returned to the resort. As they prepared dinner at the resort, his wife mentioned they were short on ingredients and went to a nearby supermarket to buy more. While she was out, he started taking a shower. Mid-shower, a realization hit him. Since the previous night, through the restroom incident, and now the knock-knock sounds all had a consistent, eerie rhythm. He quickly opened the bathroom door, but no one was there. So he left the bathroom door open and continued showering. But then the knock-knock sounded from the front door again. He'd open the door, find no one, close it, and the knocking would resume. Growing increasingly nervous, he decided to peek through the peephole the moment he heard the sound, positioning himself by the front door. About a minute later, the knock-knock came again. He looked through the peephole and saw his wife standing there. Relieved, he opened the door to let her in. But something fell off. She looked unhappy, her face sullen, and she went straight to the kitchen. Puzzled, he started to follow her when he heard a voice from the front door. "Honey, open the door, I got the meat." He cautiously opened it, and there was his wife standing outside. At that exact moment, the kitchen cabinet above the sink crashed down with a loud bang. If he had followed the woman into the kitchen, who knows what would have happened? The thought alone was terrifying. Feeling uneasy, he explained everything to his wife and suggested they leave. But since he was usually so playful and humorous, she didn't fully believe him. They contacted the resort owner and, for starters, switched to a different room. After moving to the new room, they ate dinner, watched TV, and everything seemed fine until bedtime. No strange noises. He was starting to relax and prepare for sleep when the knock-knock sounded again. This time, his wife was scared too. The knocking persisted, so he called the resort owner, asking him to check if anyone was outside their door. A while later, the owner called back. "I've been standing here for over 10 minutes and there's no one." Thinking he might have misheard, he was about to hang up when the owner suddenly said in a panicked voice, "Hey, come out here now." Confused, he grabbed his phone, took his wife's hand, and rushed outside. In the brief moment of opening and closing the door, he saw something. As they ran out of the resort and shut the door behind them, he caught a glimpse of a hand reaching out from inside, through the crack of the door. He grabbed the resort owner and demanded to know what was going on. The owner said, "No matter how closely I looked, I didn't see anyone. I was about to leave, thinking you'd misheard, when I suddenly felt a chill down my spine. I didn't see anything, but it felt like someone was walking into your room. And then what? Well, don't tell anyone else, okay? The truth is, about a year ago, a young woman died in the room you were first staying in. It was a cold winter night, and she was at the resort with friends. She went out to buy alcohol, got robbed, and was stabbed. She managed to drag herself back to the room and knocked on the door for help, but her friends were too drunk to hear her. After hearing this, he packed up their things and drove home. Up until the day he told me this story, he still hadn't shaken off the fear from that experience. I should have laughed it off and said, "Come on, stop lying." But the terror on his face was undeniable, not the face of someone making things up. What shocked and scared me the most, though, was that his wife had passed away a year ago. This is a true story I heard from my senior colleague before I left the company. I know it's hard to believe, but it's real, and most people in the office knew his wife had died a year earlier. He'd gone through a tough time, but eventually came back to work with his usual smile. Yet, he told me he'd taken leave to go to a resort with his wife. What's more, I couldn't find any trace of the resort he mentioned, no matter how much I searched, despite it supposedly being a 3-hour drive away. I thought he might be struggling mentally, so I gently suggested he seek treatment at a hospital, but he brushed it off. Then he casually said he needed to call his wife to let her know he'd arrived somewhere, and he made the call. What stunned me was that someone clearly answered the phone. It was a chilling moment. When he stepped away to use the restroom, I immediately checked his call history. The call he'd made at 11 p.m. right in front of me didn't exist. So, who was it that answered the phone I heard on the other end? After that incident, I didn't tell the other employees, but I slowly distanced myself from him. Eventually, we had a big argument over a project, and I left the company. But I'm still genuinely worried about him. This story was told to me by my middle school math teacher about 15 or 16 years ago. Even now, retelling it sends chills down my spine. It happened when my teacher was still in elementary school. At the start of summer break, he went with his parents to visit his grandparents in the countryside. His grandparents lived in a remote rural village, and his grandmother showed signs of mild dementia. Sometimes, in the early mornings or evenings, she wouldn't recognize family members, though she was fine during the day. His grandfather, a calm and steady man, took care of her, and the two of them lived quietly, relying on each other in their rural home. My teacher's parents, on the other hand, lived in Seoul, where they worked and raised their children. That summer, my teacher was thrilled to visit the countryside. He described the scene vividly to us in class, sketching it on a blackboard. His grandparents' house was surrounded by a stone fence, with a tiled roof and a traditional porch, the quintessential Korean rural home. Outside, there was a septic toilet and a chicken coop. Beyond the stone gate, a small stream ran in front of the house, where you could catch snails and freshwater shrimp. A bit farther out was a large lake, and across from it stood a hill that connected to a taller mountain. Coming from Seoul, my teacher was excited by the novelty of the countryside, things he couldn't experience in the city. As soon as they arrived, he was treated to a hearty meal of boiled potatoes, sweet potatoes, and watermelon, a feast compared to city fare. His mother busied herself with household chores, while his father napped after the long drive. My teacher, left to his own devices, grabbed a plastic bottle and headed to the stream to catch snails. While he was engrossed in catching snails and shrimp, a girl who looked like a 5th or 6th grader approached him and asked to join in. For the sake of the story, I'll call her Suni. She sat down beside him, and they had a blast catching snails together. As the sky began to darken and their bottle was brimming with snails, they said their goodbyes and went their separate ways. Back at the house, my teacher proudly showed off his haul of snails and mentioned that he'd been playing with a girl named Suni by the stream. His grandparents said there was no one named Suni in the village, but his parents brushed it off, thinking she was probably another kid visiting for the summer. The matter was soon forgotten. The next day, my teacher's parents joined him to play by the stream. While there, he climbed a small hill nearby and spotted Suni walking in the distance. He called out, "Suni, hey Suni," but she kept walking without turning back. He pointed her out to his parents, saying, "Look, that's the girl I played with yesterday." But they replied, "There's no one there, son." When he looked again, Suni was gone. He figured she must have been shy around his parents and slipped away. That evening, the family ate dinner together and went to bed, exhausted from a day of playing in the water. In the early hours of the morning, my teacher woke up needing to use the bathroom. He'd eaten a lot at dinner and drunk plenty of watermelon juice, so the urge was strong. The outhouse was far from the main house, and it was dark outside, so he was scared to go. Instead, he decided to relieve himself on the porch. As he stepped outside, he saw his grandmother holding something and muttering to herself. Peering closer, he realized she was cutting the throat of a chicken, splattering blood across the yard. He called out, "Grandma, what are you doing?" She didn't respond, just kept muttering, "You 18-year-old girl, why do you keep coming here? Why do you keep coming?" He tried again, "Grandma, what's wrong? Why is your face like that?" But she didn't answer, her expression blank and unsettling. Terrified, he ran inside, woke his father, and told him something was wrong with Grandma. His father, thinking she was having one of her dementia episodes, went out and gently brought her back inside. His mother followed and saw the dead chicken and blood scattered across the yard. The household was thrown into chaos, everyone waking up in the middle of the night. Eventually, his grandmother returned to normal, acting as if nothing had happened. On the third day, my teacher continued exploring the countryside. At night, the village's streetlights attracted swarms of insects. Under their glow, you could find beetles and other bugs. Armed with his plastic bottle, he went out to collect live insects under the streetlights. While he was busy picking up beetles, he saw Suni, the girl he played with on the first day, walking toward him. He greeted her. "Hey, how are you doing?" She joined him naturally, collecting bugs together. He asked, "I saw you by the stream yesterday. Why'd you run off?" She replied, "Don't act like you know grown-ups." He couldn't recall her exact words after that, but there was something along those lines. As they continued catching bugs, Suni told him she knew a place with even more unusual insects and invited him to go with her. Excited, he agreed. Holding her hand, he followed her toward the lake. They walked along the lake's edge, and he asked, "Where are we going?" She only said, "We're almost there." By then, it was getting very dark, far from the streetlights, and my teacher started to feel scared. He said, "Let's go back home." But Suni held his hand tightly and repeated, "We're almost there." Just as his fear was reaching its peak, his grandmother suddenly appeared from behind. In that instant, Suni let go of his hand and bolted along the lake's edge, then up the hill, running as if something were chasing her. My teacher, overwhelmed with fear, burst into tears. He grabbed his grandmother's hand, but she was muttering again, just like the night with the chicken. "You 18-year-old girl, why do you keep coming here? Why do you keep coming?" Holding hands, they walked back home. His grandmother later had no memory of the incident. Even though he was young, my teacher realized that Suni was a ghost. He told his family everything, and his parents believed him because the story was so detailed. From then on, he refused to go out at night during the rest of their stay in the countryside, sticking close to his parents until they returned to Seoul. For the remainder of the summer, he never saw Suni again. This story took place in the late 1980s or early 1990s. Three close friends, all high school students, decided to go camping in a secluded valley during their summer break. They wanted a place where they could freely grill meat, swim in a stream, and drink soju, a traditional Korean rice liquor, without anyone bothering them. To prepare for the trip, each friend was assigned to bring essential supplies like a tent, tarp, and portable grill. Since they didn't have a car, they agreed to meet at a bus station. They took a long-distance bus to a rural province, then switched to a local village bus to venture deeper into the valley, where they hoped to find a quiet stream. On the village bus, besides the three friends and the driver, there was only one other passenger, a woman holding a newborn baby. The rural road was rough, causing the bus to jolt and shake violently, yet the baby in the woman's arms slept soundly, undisturbed by the bumpy ride. The three friends, seated in the back, noticed this odd detail and exchanged glances. When they reached the final stop, the woman and the friends got off the bus together. Since they were heading in different directions, they quickly lost sight of her. The friends, relying on a map and occasional directions from passers-by, made their way to the stream they had chosen for their campsite. They set up their tent, laid out the tarp, and spent hours playing in the stream, splashing and laughing. When hunger set in, they fired up the grill to cook samgyeopsal, Korean pork belly, and cracked open their bottles of soju. As they ate and drank, enjoying the carefree moment, they noticed the woman from the bus approaching them, still carrying her baby. They recognized her immediately, as there hadn't been many people on the bus, and the sight of her with the infant was distinctive. The woman came closer, sat down near their campsite, and asked, "Hey kids, can I have a cup of soju?" The friends, being polite, didn't refuse. They poured her a cup, and she drank a few more, joining their conversation briefly. Suddenly, she burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. The friends were startled and unsure what to do. Through her sobs, she choked out, "Can you kids help me with something?" The friends, concerned, replied, "Of course, ma'am, just tell us what you need." The woman held out her baby and said, "Can you help me bury my child?" At that moment, the friends were horrified to realize the baby was dead. The reason it had slept so peacefully on the bus was because it was no longer alive. Despite their fear, they felt deep sympathy for the grieving mother and agreed to help her. Together, they followed the woman a short distance to a large, ancient tree. She asked them to dig a hole beneath it. Since they didn't have a shovel, they used rocks to scrape away the dirt. Once the hole was deep enough, the woman gently placed her baby in it. She took an envelope of money and a few pieces of candy from her pocket, placing them on the baby's chest. Sobbing, she said, "My sweet child, eat lots of candy, okay? Use this money to buy delicious food, and don't be sad. Live happily, my baby." The friends couldn't bear to leave her alone in her grief. They stayed by her side as she covered the grave with soil. When it was done, the woman handed them 100,000 won, roughly equivalent to $100 at the time in South Korea, a significant sum for high schoolers. She said, "I don't know how to thank you, kids. Please take this money for some pocket cash." The friends tried to refuse, but she insisted, saying, "If you don't take it, I'll feel terrible." Reluctantly, they accepted the money. After saying goodbye to the woman, they returned to their campsite. The experience left them shaken, and the mood for fun was gone. They sat around the grill, eating their pork belly and drinking in silence. After a few more cups of soju, one friend, let's call him, started talking, his voice slurred from the alcohol. "Hey, did you guys see the envelope that lady put on the baby?" The other two, B and C, snapped at him. "Are you crazy? Don't bring that up." But I persisted, "Think about it. That envelope was huge. There's got to be more than 1,000,000 won in there, not just 100,000. The baby's gone. It's not like it needs the money. It's such a waste to leave it buried." B and C, though hesitant, started to waver as A's words sank in, their judgment clouded by the alcohol and the temptation of the money. They decided to go back to the tree, dig up the envelope, and take the money. Grabbing their flashlight, they trekked through the dark to find the tree. Fortunately, it wasn't far from their campsite, and its massive size made it easy to locate. One friend, let's call him D, stood watch while the other two began digging with rocks. As they dug, D suddenly screamed and bolted, running as if his life depended on it. Startled, B and C dropped their rocks and chased after him, not knowing what had happened. D ran frantically, never slowing down. They ran for what felt like an eternity, their lungs burning, until they spotted the light of a small convenience store in the distance. Only then did D finally stop. All three were gasping for air, their faces streaked with sweat and tears. B and C yelled at D, "You maniac, why'd you run like that? What happened?" D, sobbing and struggling to breathe, said, "While you guys were digging, I looked up and that woman was standing in the tree, staring down at us." B and C froze, terror washing over them. D was completely broken, trembling and unable to calm down. They didn't dare return to their campsite to retrieve their belongings. D refused to set foot in the valley again. Too terrified to go back, even with their flashlight, they abandoned their tent and supplies. Luckily, the convenience store they'd stumbled upon had a sign that read motel. Exhausted and desperate, they went inside and asked the owner, "Sir, how much is a night at the motel?" The owner replied, "About 20,000 to 30,000 won." The problem was, they hadn't brought their wallets or bags. They'd left everything at the campsite. None of them had the courage to go back. Then they remembered the 100,000 won the woman had given them. The friend who had taken the money reached into his pocket to pull it out. But when he opened his hand, it wasn't money he was holding. It was a leaf.